What was the state of the sport when you were, or the state of the UFC when you were interested in purchasing it?
It was going out of business. It was basically going out of business. This guy, I don't know if he had the money or didn't, but was not willing to fund it anymore. It was it was at the end of his rope. It was going out of business.
So you and the Fertitta brothers, heirs to the Station Casino billion-dollar fortune, and your former classmates, I guess, were fans of the UFC even before you bought it, would occasionally travel around the country just to sit as spectators at the events, and always thought that you guys could do this better. So when you learned that the UFC was indeed up for sale, what did you do?
Well, what happened was, originally Lorenzo and I were going to get involved in boxing. And I was out with his brother Frank one night at the Hard Rock.
And Lorenzo being the CEO now of
Right.
UFC.
And we saw John Lewis, who used to fight in the UFC. And Frank said, I've always wanted to learn ground fighting because we all used to box. So I said, yeah, me too. So we went over. I knew him. We started talking to him, and we set up a lesson for Monday. We told Lorenzo. Lorenzo came too. And we started taking jiu-jitsu, and we were blown away by it. Blown away. We fell in love with it. We started training 3-4 days a week. We'd all try to learn more than the other one so we could submit them next time we wrestled. And through that, we started to meet some of the fighters. And then we were blown away by the fighters. These guys were smart. They were incredible athletes. And then we went to our first UFC event, and we sat in the crowd and started to go, man, imagine if they did this and imagine if they did that. This thing could be big. And then I started managing Tito and Chuck. I met those guys, started managing them, and I got into this huge contract battle over Tito's contract with the old owner. And through that, it lasted almost a year. And through that, I found out that the UFC was in trouble. And like I said, Lorenzo and I were going to get involved in boxing. They were down in Miami. I called them and said, I think this thing's in trouble. I think we could buy the UFC. And a month later, we owned the company.
How was the deal structured between the three of you?
We originally, the deal was I owned 10%. They owned the rest. I was the president, came in and took this thing over and started to run it. Then, throughout the years here, the Abu Dhabi now is a partner. These guys are 10% partners too. So it's me, Abu Dhabi, and Frank and Lorenzo.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I know Lorenzo had said initially they just kind of bought it as a hobby with no real, plan set out for what they wanted to do with it. Obviously, it's become wildly successful, and you very well may have expected this, but it seems unlikely anybody could have expected it to become this successful this soon. So what happens if they want to, sell their 80%, and the dynamic of the relationship then changes?
Yeah, it's, well, first of all, they bought it as a hobby, but
More to it than that?
it was a business.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because we bought it for $2 million. They invested another 44 into it. That's one hell of a hobby. You know what I mean? And the way that I look at 44 million is you had like 80-something million before you got taxed and ended up with your 44 million. So it was a big investment. It was more than a hobby. It was definitely a hobby, but it was a business that they 100% believed in. The crazy thing about this is when you start looking at the money side of this thing and you say, what if the Fertittas wanted to sell this? Understand it's a business. And in business, everything is always for sale, But right now, and this might be arrogant, but it's truly what we believe, that we're the only guys that can do this. We're the only guys that can take this thing to where it needs to be. We're definitely the guys that love it, are passionate about it, and have the roadmap for where this thing's going to go. So I can't say that they wouldn't do that. It could happen, and if it did, we'd see what happens. I mean, somebody else would come in and buy it, and maybe me and the Fertittas move on, or I just couldn't see myself. I don't know. I don't know if I could see myself doing it without them.
Really?
We got into this thing together, and we have an amazing work and friendship dynamic. I think about this. The one thing that's made this thing successful has been the relationship between me and the Fertittas. When things were going bad, and you're $44 million in the hole and you're losing money, there's going to be some finger pointing. You know what I mean? Oh, you were the wrong guy. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And never once did they do that and say, we're in the hole 44 million. We think you made a bunch of mistakes. Because I was the only guy over here in the early days. You know what I mean? Then when everything starts taking off and it becomes incredibly successful and you're doing interviews and that's when everybody starts going, hey, this is mine. Hey, I'm the guy. Hey, I made this happen. And there's never been any of that either. There's never been me going back and going, I want more than my 10%. Any successful band, any successful business, you see it happen all the time. Great bands break up. Businesses fall apart because guys start fighting and arguing. Never happens with us. And one of the big reasons is, and I said it earlier and it's the truth, I could care less about money. I don't care about money. I love this sport, I love this brand, and I love what we're doing. And I get up every day. And treat this thing like I own 100% of it.
What was the lowest point of those early years for you?
The lowest point was when Lorenzo called me and said, I can't keep funding this thing, man. I can't call my brother again to ask him to fund this thing. I need you to get out there and see what we can get for this thing. I started making calls all that day. And he called me back that night and I said, I don't know, man, 6, maybe 8 million. He said, all right, I'll call you tomorrow. He called me the next day and said, let's do it. Let's keep going. So
what was that night like for you?
Number one, the thought of failing. Number two, the thought of I'm the one that came with this idea. I'm the one that wanted to do this. And now I just lost my friends 30-something million bucks. Because at that time, we were probably in 30 to 30-something million.
Is there more pressure when you're at your lowest point, as you were 44 million in the hole, or when you're on top of the world? And
I think it's all the same. We actually put a ton of pressure on ourselves. As successful as this thing gets, like when we signed the Fox deal, the first thing everybody started saying to me when we signed the Fox deal is, you did it. You're mainstream now. We're not mainstream, man. Don't start patting us on the back yet. We've been given the opportunity to go mainstream. Now's the time that we got to dig in and work harder than we ever did. We got to deliver now. So we've been given the opportunity to go mainstream. And now it's up to us to take it and make it happen.